must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military industrial complex.
What's up, everybody? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Today we got James Corbett, one of the first guests that ever came on the show. I believe this is his third appearance on the show, and I'm just a huge fan of his and love having him on. He just has such well thought out opinions and perspectives on things, and his website, thecorbettreport.com, is one of my favorite websites to go to. If you guys haven't checked it out, please check it out. If there's any topic you want to learn more about, if it's historical event or a current event, if it's things like the JFK assassination, Iran-Contras, GMOs, Big Pharma, whatever it is, he has something on there. He has a huge archive of just podcasts, documentaries, videos, and he's so well researched, always has links to the articles he got the information from, or clips from the interview that he got the information from. So it's just a really great source for news, and it's all free. And then if you want more content, you can be a paid member of his website, and he'll send you more videos, articles, podcasts, and all that stuff, so you can get even more information. But he puts out a lot of information for free, a lot of videos, and his documentary, Century of Enslavement, is out for free. James Corbett is just a really fun guy to talk to, and always a ball of information. And definitely check out his website if you aren't familiar with it. Also, remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All our shows are up there, and any guest that calls in using video, you can actually see us have the conversation. We do a side-by-side video version of the episode, so definitely check that out. And in the show descriptions, you can always find links to our guest's website, Twitter account, Facebook account, also my websites, Twitter accounts, Facebook accounts, my music project, all that stuff, so definitely check that out. On this episode, we talked a lot about foreign policy, the links between historical events and current events, like the fall of the Ottoman Empire and the Western world's kind of carving up the Middle East, and how that has affected what is the Middle East today and the conflicts that are going on there today. So a couple documentaries I would recommend checking out is Promises and Betrayals. All these are on YouTube. Also, Blood and Oil. Those are both about the fall of the Ottoman Empire and also the Western influence in the Middle East, and you'll see how a lot of the things that happened then are still causing some of the issues that we have today. Also, War and Democracy, but that talks about Latin America and the U.S. and their influence on Latin America. For example, in 1945 in Guatemala, the United Fruit Company and the CIA took down the democratically elected president of Guatemala, and they didn't like his policies. And before that, they had a dictator for like 30 years that was very friendly to the U.S. and the United Fruit Company. And then, I mean, it's pretty insane to think about it, to think about a democratically elected president of Guatemala gets taken down because United Fruit Company and the CIA didn't like his policies. And it was like minimum wage and socializing some things, and it was just, basically made things harder for them to make money. And we funded rebels, we funded a coup to take down the government. So it's pretty insane how we've had our hand in so many of the world's conflicts and internal conflicts in countries, and we're always trying to take down somebody who's not friendly to the U.S. and U.S. corporations or international corporations to put somebody in who is friendly to the U.S. Same thing happened in Cuba with Batista, who was very friendly to the U.S. and the U.S. mobsters and politicians who were making all their money in Havana, Cuba. And then when the revolution happened with Castro and kicked out a lot of them, then all of a sudden, obviously, the U.S. hated Cuba. So a lot of these international conflicts, it's amazing how many of them the U.S. has had a hand in influencing who eventually gets into power causing these conflicts or whatnot. So it's really interesting. So definitely check out all those documentaries. The Panama Deception is another really interesting one. It's kind of an older documentary, but you can find it online. The quality isn't great, but it's definitely still worth watching and still super informative. So do all that, and I'll see you on the next episode. Peace.
Hello.
What's up, James?
How you doing?
Hey, nice to see you again.
Yeah, a long time no talk. How long has it been?
It's been a while. I'd say at least, well, it can't be longer than 9 months, because I think last time I talked to you, I did mention that I was having a child. So I did just have a baby boy the 19th of February. So
awesome. Congratulations.
Thanks, man. It's I was talking to Guy Evans not too long ago, and he doesn't have any children. He was kind of asking me a bunch of questions about it, and I was telling him how, from the outside looking in, I know so many people who told me the same thing. Oh, it's going to change your life. It's going to change your life. It's going to change your life. And it's like, you hear it over and over again. And it's like, you think you understand, but until you go through it, you really don't. You have no idea. And I think it's the whole...
There's no way to prepare.
Yeah, there really isn't. Well, I mean, the crazy thing is, like, leaving the hospital and, like, you know, like reality sets in, like, holy shit, I am responsible for this person's life. And just I mean, it's like, you feel like you're a responsible person, but now it's like, if I mess up in other aspects of life, you know, it's not a huge deal, but if I fuck up here, it's a huge deal. So it's you know, being...
it's a pretty harrowing moment, but pretty amazing. I mean, it's just it's so awesome to watch them growing up and seeing them change day by day. It's just awesome to watch.
And the experience, you know, when you're doing it with your significant other and going through, you know, I think it's the whole process from, like, the first ultrasound to, you know, getting contractions to being, I mean, like, the whole process, and finally they're here, you know, after like 9 months of waiting. So it's just like I think I kind of just expected, okay, yeah, you have a kid, I get it, but it's like, it is the whole process that kind of builds up to it. And then I remember leaving the hospital, and I'm like, holy shit, like, if we had an issue, we could just hit a button and a nurse was there, and, like, you know, in a couple of minutes. Now we have no button. Like, we're on our own.
Now it's just you.
Yeah, and I remember telling you one of the times when you're on about how, when you're a kid, you know, your parents are always trying to convince you to have everything figured out and, you know, do it my way because this is the way it should be and I have it figured out. And then when you become adult, you realize how they didn't have anything figured out. We're all kind of just figuring it out as we go. And it's so true, because even now it's like, you get so many opinions from different parents, from, like, how you should do things, how you shouldn't do things. And it's like, you know, there's a billion different ways of doing, you know, the same thing. And it's like, yeah, it's true that, hey, you know, we all survived. So the way my parents did it might not be the same way we do it now, but obviously I'm here, so it worked, you know?
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
But it is hard, because did you run into that? Like, just getting so many opinions and information that you're like, you know, it's kind of mind-boggling.
You know what? The only thing people told me, it consistently, absolutely every time, was just enjoy every moment because they grow up so quickly. And I know I've heard that my whole life, and it really is true. So I don't know. Other than that, people, I guess, give advice, but I don't care. As you say, I mean, everyone has their own ways of doing things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, our little guy's still not, he's not sleeping through the night yet. He's only a month old. So, you know, we're getting tons of different, flip them, or do, you know, or do this or do that, you know, put them in here, you know, it's just like, but, you know, every kid's different, every parent's different. So it's like, you kind of just have to feel them out and kind of figure it out yourself. But it is fun. And the one thing I heard the same thing, that enjoy it because it blows by you. And holy shit, was that right? Because it's been a month and it feels like he was just born yesterday, and it's already a month. And
Yeah.
the first couple of days when you're up basically 24 hours a day because you're just sleeping 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there, it feels like the days are really long and like, holy shit, time's not going to fly by. Time's slowing down. But once they start sleeping a little more and you get in a routine, it definitely does fly by. I can see how I can miss the little guy he is today as he gets older and be like, holy shit, I didn't enjoy as much as I wanted to when he was little. But
Yeah.
but like you said,
Well, exactly. I mean, a few months passes for you, and what changes? Nothing. But a few months passes for your kid, and it's completely different.
yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a wild ride, and I'll tell you, it only I think it's going to motivate me to do this more than ever, and I know it's gonna be harder than ever because that's the other thing I was going to tell you is I always called you like the hardest working man on the web, and now after having a child, I had no idea how much I really meant those words. Like, how do you do it? I mean, were you a zombie for months, or were you?
Yes,
Yeah.
but I was quite used to being a zombie by that point because I'd already, given up sleep for the last several years anyway, so it was okay for me. But at this point now, I've had to completely change the way I work and what I do and what I'm able to accomplish. I mean, I can't live up to some sort of arbitrary deadline anymore. If I have a podcast that I want to get out on a Monday and it doesn't get out till Thursday, then so be it. I can't beat myself up about that because, you just can't. You can't predict sometimes. I mean, if your kid suddenly gets sick or whatever, you just got to take care of them. And,
Yeah, I think that's important. That's especially after you have a child, and obviously life's kind of unpredictable. I think this whole I need to release this by Friday, I used to do that too, where I'm just like, I just did this podcast. I'll stay up late to make sure I get it out by the weekend. But then it's like, well, if I don't, a couple of people might be disappointed, but once I do get it out, people forget about the fact that it's a little late and they just enjoy it and it's not that big of a deal. So I mean, I can definitely see, and with you, obviously, you have a son. I mean, priority number one is the son, and then we can wait. And do you ever have this battle between like quantity over quality too? Like, okay, let me take a little bit more time and
yeah, it's a constant thing. I mean, you gotta find some sort of balance, and I'm finding a new balance lately. I'm starting to put out videos where I just do I have screen grab of what I'm looking at on the screen, and I just narrate it, and I'm able to do that much, much, much more easily than I can do the production where I have clips and videos and images and things. So I can do that on pretty much a daily basis if I want to at this point. So I might switch more towards that style, but I'll still keep the other style. It's always the balance, how much can you sacrifice the quality for the quantity, and what's the happy medium? And I'm sure I'll never be happy with that, but
yeah, I noticed that recently some of your newer videos you were doing that, and I was wondering that myself. I'm like, I wonder if he's doing it because obviously he can kind of pop these out a lot quicker, get a point across a lot quicker. Obviously, to do a whole video production on a subject with clips from archives and this and that. It's a
those
lot
last
harder.
couple of videos I did, I could have easily done like the old style of eye opener report or whatever, but that's a huge time commitment. Even back when I wasn't taking care of my son, that would be a day or two to assemble all of that and record it and edit it. Whereas with this, as I say, I can get it up in a few hours. So,
well, that's the thing. I think we don't realize those, 4, 5, sometimes 8-minute videos, how long they take to put together. Because I watch them and I realize like, holy shit, he really has my attention, and that's because you put so much into them, like from old archive stuff to like you show screenshots of articles and all this stuff, and I'm like, this is like a little documentary, and
yeah, pretty much, So I'm kind of changing what I'm able to do, but I mean, you just got to change your expectations. I can't do what I was doing before, so I'll do what I can do now, and I don't know if a lot of people are responding positively to it, so that's good.
Yeah, I think that's always a little bit of the fear is that how are the fans going to take it, this and that. But you got to do what's best for you, and I mean, we all love you, so we'll support you no matter what. So
awesome.
And so just before we went on the air, did you see that the Saudi Arabia Yemen thing? Apparently, Saudi Arabia just started bombing Yemen.
I didn't see that at all.
Yeah,
okay, good to know.
That's I just tweeted. BBC had it and RT America. And,
okay. See it on the headlines now. Yeah.
So from what's that all about? Well, I mean, obviously Yemen has a bunch of issues with drone attacks and conflicts and internal conflicts.
Yep.
What do you see? I mean, obviously it's probably too soon, but from the outside looking in and kind of understanding geopolitics a little bit, what would be the reasoning for
Yeah,
this.
it's saying Houthi rebels in Yemen, and Houthi rebels are supposedly backed by Iran. Iran, Saudi Arabia, arch enemies. So I see where that is. Saudi Arabia is Sunni, Iran is Shia. So it's kind of that division. Plus, of course, just the geopolitics of regional control. So it's kind of maybe a Saudi Arabian Iranian proxy war type of thing.
Yeah,
going
yeah.
on.
Yeah, that's
But yeah, I don't know a lot about that, so I'd have to look more into it. But that's my initial take.
Yeah. It's weird because one of the things I emailed you about that I want to talk about, and I get obsessed with like certain parts of history and certain times in history, and with all the Middle Eastern stuff going on, sometimes I just want to refresh my memory with, how did we get here? And obviously it goes back to, and I'm sure it probably even goes back further than that, but especially the Ottoman Empire and the fall of that, and the West's influence and promising basically both side, every side actually something, and also the borders that they created and stuff like that. And I think that's such an important thing for people to do, is go back and look at how did we get here, and the influence we had, and how the Middle East is basically created today with the countries and borders and stuff like that. And is that something you really got into, and you do, how much of a impact do you think that had on the conflicts today?
It's incalculable. Literally the map looks like what it looks like because of decisions that were made in drawing rooms in Paris in 1919. So, yeah, the world would be fundamentally different if there wasn't that type of manipulation going on in the Middle East. And it's obviously huge. We can't really do a controlled experiment and take that out of the picture to see what the world would have looked like if things had progressed in a different way. But there's no doubt that it's been extremely important to what's happening today, and continues to be. Kurdistan should be a state. If anything should be a state, as Kurdistan should be, but it wasn't. It was, I think, deliberately divided up into different areas of Iraq and Turkey and other places to keep the Kurds as kind of a wild card in that, so that they could be used as proxies for various political purposes, exactly as they are right now. So, yeah, there's a lot to be said there. And it's an extremely important aspect of what goes on that a lot of people who just don't know the history can't kind of understand.
Yeah, and that agreement I'm not going to say it right. The Sykes-Picot agreement between
right.
Mark Sykes and the French guy, Picot, who was basically they drew out lines on what parts of the Middle East are going to have influence on. Yep. Exactly,
a secret agreement. It was arranged during the war, wasn't it?
It
between
was.
November 5th, 1915, March 2nd. Yeah, exactly. Which was extremely influential in the way that it was the negotiations were shaped after the war, of course, and again helped to shape the map that we know today, including Syria.
Yeah, and I think that's the important thing for people to realize, is that a lot of these conflicts that, like the Iraq War, the Syrian thing, all these conflicts, Vietnam, all these things that from the outside looking in, people, we're told that, it's for this reason or for that reason. It's for, we're just trying to help the people. There's always some backdoor deals going on. There's always some corporate interest. There's always some geopolitical interest, and things never seem to be what they seem to be. And I remember looking back at just the Korean War and meeting a guy when I was younger that was in the Korean War. He called it the Forgotten War. And I'm always like, yeah, well, I didn't know anything about the Korean War, so it is the Forgotten War. So I looked it up, and then come to find out that U.S. and Russia both had, influence in that, and China, yeah, and then Angola, their civil war, and me being Portuguese, I was always really interested in some of the Portuguese history and some of the Portuguese colonies that got their independence and stuff, and some of that historical events. And then when I found out that the U.S. also had a hand in that and influencing the outcome in that and some of the civil wars there. I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, is there any conflict in the world history that the U.S. since World War I doesn't have their hand in, or is influencing an outcome, or during the conflict?
It's hard to think of one, isn't it?
Yeah. It's insanity. And the thing is that you can look this up and it's all there, and it's because it's history, because it happened, we can accept it happened. But when it's happening now, it's almost like it's when it's happening. We there's a lot of people who just believe the bullshit we're being told, but then after we look back and we're like, yeah, they did lie to us about Iraq, but they're telling the truth now. And then like 10 years later, we'll be like, oh, I guess they did lie to us about Syria too, and they did lie to us. It's like, what is it? Do you think that because it's old, because it's historic, it's a historic event, that it's easier to accept, and then in the moment, for some reason, even though it just seems like the same story over and over again, just different times and different characters, why can't people accept the fact that it's history sometimes is happening now the same way it happened before?
I have a lot to say about that, but maybe we should start getting this on the record. I only have about half an hour.
Oh, we can. We can keep talking. I'll just keep it all on the record.
Okay. All right. Excellent. All right. Well, then I guess what I would say is that we should think of, for example, about 10 years ago or so, it was revealed in the New York Times by, I can't remember who, that at a sort of behind the scenes Washington function, that Karl Rove said something to the effect of, you think you live in the reality-based community. You think that everything that's happening is just happening, and you're kind of scrutinizing it and looking for what's happening and why it's happening. But we are the masters of that reality. We create that reality. And while you're busy studying what we've created, we will go out and create a new reality, and you'll start studying that. And I think that is an extremely important part of the underlying psychology of why people buy into what's going on, because people are usually in an analytical mode or a reactive mode more so than in the idea that reality is being created right now. So that we're always looking at something that's happened. It's happened. It's a fait accompli. So all we can do is sort of scrutinize it. Why did it happen? What's happening? Meanwhile, the agenda continues to unfold. And of course, as my listeners, and I'm sure your listeners know, just by keeping certain parts of the story under wraps or less well known, you can influence the way people believe the story is taking shape. And there's so many different examples of that. But I mean, if we're thinking about this idea of manipulation in foreign countries, you look at the concept of covert war. So, for example, I mean, as one example, Operation TP Ajax in the 1950s, that was the CIA operation headed by Kermit Roosevelt, who was the grandson of Teddy. Related to Teddy, in the Roosevelt family, who headed up that operation to overthrow Mossadegh in Iran, the democratically elected leader of Iran in the 1950s, by basically stirring up angry crowds within Iran and funding them and helping to support them in their overthrow of Mossadegh. It wasn't until relatively recently that it was finally admitted, and I believe Obama came out and admitted that history, although it's been known for a very long time, and the actual documents, the TP Ajax documents, have been released for at least a decade or so, maybe a couple decades by this point. So that's one example of how that works. And I think it's an illustrative example because I think that phenomenon still takes place today. It's not just that that this reality is is created out of nothing. It's usually playing on existing tensions, playing on things that are already there, but helping them, funding them, supporting them, and making that become more important than it otherwise would be. And I think we've seen that take place over and over and over and over and over again, as you say, this same reality taking place, like in Libya, where here's some people who are angry and don't like Gaddafi. Let's fund them. Let's support them. Let's make them the humanitarian cause célèbre. Let's, make all the news about these people and how they're being oppressed. And then there's this idea that somehow this is some sort of level playing field and this is a real conflict that's taking place. And that actually does become a reality because it is being supported in that way. And then lo and behold, wouldn't you know it, the same people and fighters and forces and funds and arms all somehow end up in Syria, and the exact same process starts taking place there. And again, just because most people don't know about that that history, that relation between the fighters that were there, that were transported into Libya and then transported off to Syria to continue doing that kind of proxy warfare. Because most people don't know about that, or it isn't talked about so much. It can happen again and again, and people don't even know that there's a relation between what's happening. So I think so much of it is that idea of covert manipulation. If you can keep it under wraps, or at least undercover enough that the majority of people don't know about it, then the majority of people will be happy to support this war or that war because they don't even realize they're part of a linked agenda.
Yeah, and even the Iran hostage thing, a lot of people, they know about that event, but they don't realize that a lot of that was influenced. Wasn't it influenced by us basically taking down their democratically elected president? And that's what they were mad about. And that's one part of the story that we're never told.
Well, yeah, no, that had to do with the Iranian Revolution and the overthrow of the Iranian dictator that had been placed in after the fall of Mossadegh, which was engineered by the U.S. So yes, I mean, this does stretch back to the 50s in Operation Ajax. But yeah, I mean, that is part of an outgrowth of that history. And of course, the brutal reign of the dictator, the Shah of Iran, who was supported by the U.S. and the West, quite obviously so, was supported for years and then was overthrown in the Iranian Revolution, which then caused the Iranian hostage crisis, and then we had Iran-Contra and things like that, which show, of course, they're happy to deal with anyone that will be useful to the furthering of an agenda, whatever that agenda is, whether that's the Contras in Nicaragua and running drugs up into the United States, or selling weapons to Iran against Congress, specific congressional laws or whatever. And, a couple of people get token thrown in jail, but most people get off scot-free, including, of course, George H.W. Bush, who was up at the top of the whole operation, running it with Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, who's now a Fox talking head. So it all works out well for the people who are involved in these operations at the highest levels. And as I say, a couple of people get thrown under the bus. But even for those people, it's not a big deal. You had Admiral Poindexter as one of the very few people who actually, I think, did go to jail, or at least was sentenced for his part in Iran-Contra. But he went on to have a happy career after that as well, including heading up the Total Information Awareness Office that was floated in 2002, where DARPA was talking about this idea. Why don't we just take every piece of data that we possibly can on everyone that we possibly can, including credit card information, health records, whatever we can snuffle up into our big snoot, and why don't we just collect all this and analyze it 6 ways from Sunday, and we'll crawl the Total Information Awareness Office, and we'll have a logo with an all-seeing eye in a pyramid radiating the Earth. And somehow, for some reason, the public didn't go along with that. So Admiral Poindexter and everyone goes out and says, "Oh, sorry, our mistake. We won't do that," and the program gets officially canceled. Of course, as we know, the NSA was doing the whole thing the whole time. It was just they were floating it out to the public to see if the public were ready for it yet, and they weren't. So they waited a few years and tried again. George Bush getting up and saying, "Honest, don't worry, you've got a Fourth Amendment. We're not doing anything illegal. We're not listening in on all your phone calls." "Oh, wait, yes, we are. And now we're going to grant a retroactive immunity to the telecoms." And then the Snowden psyop takes place, and everyone's like, "Oh, well, okay, so now they're just spying on everything." And that seems to be where we're at. So, again, people can be led along a path, and sometimes they'll throw out a little piece and see how that floats. And if it doesn't float well, they'll try it in a different way. And again, as sad as it is, maybe Rove's quote is right. Maybe they are masters of reality that are shaping our world. But that's only because we've forsaken our ability to actually influence the world. We've forsaken our responsibility as people to be actors in history rather than simply people looking at it. And that's one of the dangers of the sort of mass media world that we live in, is that we become spectators of reality. Well, these are things that are happening. What can we do about it? And that's one of the things that I see as so promising about the internet revolution, is that it allows us to really become engaged with these things in an interactive way. We can actually put our own thoughts, our own ideas, our own selves into this societal conversation that's taking place. And I'm not deluded enough to think that myself or anyone individually is going to change, the course of world geopolitics or whatever simply by talking about it. But if we are engaged, if we are active, if we are actually doing something, rather than simply being passive receptacles for information, that can change that dynamic whereby we simply accept whatever's happening. And I don't pretend to know how that's going to change or what that's going to look like in the end, or even if we ultimately will prevail in this. Maybe our fate is sealed. But at any rate, we have to try, and we have to, I think, at least understand that history is not something that is just in textbooks. It is something that is happening now. It is happening, and we can either try to shape it in the way that we want. We can either try to create the types of communities that we want to create, or we can just put our hands off and let it go and just grab a pail of popcorn and get ready to watch the Armageddon take place, which is unfortunately another underlying factor that drives a lot of people. They want to see this happen. They want to see the spectacular, end of the world type of scenario play out. And I think that's another thing that is played on in people's psychology to keep them sort of actually kind of interested in this. It's kind of entertaining. It's kind of a fear porn theater kind of thing. Well, let's watch. Let's see how bad things can get. And if we get into that mindset, that's another way we can be controlled. There's a lot of different control mechanisms that go on here, as you can see.
Yeah, well, my big thing is just if every great change in the world or in history, every great revolution started off with people having a conversation, people having just a idea that they wanted to share, and then that became, to use the ripple effect, and I truly believe in that theory. I believe in the idea. Yourself, you've connected with so many people, and you've touched so many people's lives, and I'm sure you get tons of emails, and tons of people contacting you saying how you've changed their life, you've changed their perspective, and maybe you yourself can't change a geopolitical strategy that the U.S. has for the Middle East today, but you can influence the young kid who's growing up listening to your show, who one day might be a politician, who one day might work his way up the ladder, and next thing actually have some influence on the government or on the military or on whatever, and that alone is huge. And I think we can't take that for granted. We can't think, and I think that's it's a dangerous way to think when we start thinking, oh, we can't make a difference, we can't, because then that's what we do. We give up, we don't do anything, we don't talk about it, we don't, I've been told, and I don't know if you had the same experience when you started your show, but I was told when I started this show, oh, what's the point? You're not going to make a difference. You're not. And I'm like, well, I'm way happier knowing I attempted it and I tried, and I can look back and say I really did try and care about these issues, and I try to expose these issues and do my part. And to me, I'm way more satisfied with that than just saying, oh, and how many old retired guys do you talk to that say, hey, I wish I chased that dream a little further. You never meet somebody who says, I wish I gave up sooner. Like, that's ridiculous, So, it's, so,
good point. And actually, it's interesting. The number one overwhelming thing I received when I started this from everyone I knew was, aren't you afraid you're going to be put on a list? And I was always like, yes, that's the exact reason I'm doing it.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. That's why, because we don't want to live in that world where we're afraid of everything. I've done it. I remember when I first started this show, and because I was kind of new to this whole thing, and I didn't know, I'm like, well, how quickly are we put on the radar, or how, it's like, I was kind of afraid of some of the subjects I talked about and some of the things, and then I'm like, what the fuck is going on? That I'm just a citizen who cares about the people that I live with and the community, and I hate to say country, because country is just made up lines with people living in it. I care more about just people in general and our future, and that I feel like I want to do something, and I want to to me, it was, especially me, because I have a full-time job. I have a pretty average life, and besides music and the podcast, I have a pretty average life, and I didn't feel fulfilled, so I needed this podcast to feel like I was doing my part. And it's like, well, maybe I don't have the time or finances to do something else, but the internet gives me a way where with very little money, and because I already did music, I already had equipment, I could easily start at least just sparking some thoughts, maybe start reaching people locally, friends, and then hopefully expand. And it was, there's a lot of podcasts out there who just don't do anything. But to me, it wasn't about that. It was about just feeling like I'm trying, and even if I plant the seed in one person to question, what they believe, or to rethink what they believe, or to look at things from different perspectives, then I did something. And also, for a selfish reason, I get to meet people like you who I've been watching videos forever, and I get to actually sit down and talk to the people that I'm a fan of for an hour.
Well, and that, I mean, let's not dismiss that as a secondary thing. That's an important experience in and of itself, because again, I think that's part of the contribution to that idea that we're not just spectators, we are actual participants in a conversation. So I it's always kind of funny to me when people, you send me an email or whatever, and I send a response and they're like, wow, I can't believe you responded to me. And I'm like, well, of course, I'm just a guy. I mean, I'm not floating on some cloud somewhere, but I understand. I mean, I have that same relation with some of the podcasts that I listen to, or some of the people that I admire or whatever, respect out there in the media, that you think of them as some sort of inaccessible people out there in the ether. This technology is changing that paradigm so that we are directly capable of relating and conversating with people we never could have imagined in previous eras of existence, where celebrities were always that kind of stratified existence. So I think there is something that's happening right now that is so important, but I would frame it a little bit differently than the way that you just did, talking about the way that the ideas that we're bandying about could shape the next upcoming politician or president or whatever. I think it's not going to be, from my perspective, it's not going to be a political solution. It's not going to be politicians, and it's not going to be individuals that are going to change the course of history. It's communities. And it's the question of whether we can form the types of communities that will foster the type of world that we want to live in, rather than combating the world that we don't want to live in. And I know that's a nebulous concept, and it's not one that's appealing to people who have been programmed and conditioned to accept this kind of Rambo mentality that it's going to be some big shootout, and if you're a big enough guy and you got a big enough gun, you can just kill all the bad guys, and that's how we solve the problem. And we've been deeply conditioned to believe that as a culture, as a species, perhaps by this point, because of the pervasiveness of the Hollywood memes. But it's a false template, I think. And I think the real idea here is that the ideas, yes, will change the world, but it's a question of how those ideas are implemented amongst each other, in communities of people working together towards shared goals, and at the same time withdrawing their power and energy away from the institutions that have been placed over us to supplement those, or to take the place of those natural human relations. Because, I mean, there are basic biological sort of groupings of the family, and I think we all understand those types of bonds. And of course, on top of that, then we as humans are social animals. We congregate in towns or villages or communities, and above that point, it's all a bit artificial. It's all the structures that have been placed upon us that we grow up in, so we tend to think of them as natural. Of course there's a federal government, why not? And of course we, through some process, write names down on some ballot or something, and these people get to go to hundreds of miles away to represent us in this federal government that makes rules. I mean, it's such a bizarre system in so many ways that we've completely internalized to the point where we don't recognize how bizarre it is. So the idea is that if we can regain and re-understand that truly it is how we relate to people around us on this level that is the important part of it, and if we withdraw our time, attention, energy, money, everything from those systems, those structures, those external things, they collapse. They only truly work because of our participation in them. And so the only true revolutionary idea is non-compliance, non-participation in those systems, and compliance and participation in systems that we want to build up. And again, it's not a satisfying answer for a lot of people, and it's not something that's going to change the world overnight. It's something that happens slowly and gradually and haltingly, and sometimes there's setbacks. But if we don't start stepping along that path, especially now, as we all, I think, understand, there's serious economic and political consequences to things that have been sown in the previous generations that are coming to a head at this point. And we can see some very, very dangerous directions the world is going in, with new proxy wars and new Cold War, or whatever they're trying to call it these days, and the Chinese investment bank, and all of these things are taking place right now that I think we all understand is the exact same type of buildup that we saw at the beginning of the 20th century with the buildup to World War I. I think we all understand that the similar process is taking place right now. How on earth do we avoid that? Is it going to be voting for politician A or B, or is it going to be getting ready for whatever comes by preparing our communities. And if we have communities that can sustain themselves and each other and work together cooperatively without the need for that external structure, then that's true independence. That is what the meaning of independence is, to not be reliant on those external structures of support, which are, of course, always external structures of control.
Yeah, I think I used the politician example because I honestly just didn't have a better one. But it was, yeah, but you're absolutely right. I don't think, having, I mean, the system's corrupt. So even if you work your way, you're not going to work your way up really until you give in to the corruption regardless. But that's why I know, not everybody's a big Zeitgeist fan. But one thing I think the Zeitgeist movement did was what you talked about, and was us rethinking why we think the system is the way it is and why it has to be the way it is. Like, I think what it did for me, and what I think it did for many people, was that it made you it helped you realize that, okay, this is the way we've been molded into believing that our system has to work, that our economy has to work this way, that we have to live this way, we have to do things this way, and it's the only way it can work. And what the Zeitgeist movement did was it made you rethink things. Well, what if we don't have to buy, or have currency? What if, even if it is, some people think it's a silly idea, but it's the idea that we're at least expanding our range of thought into other avenues of, okay, maybe we could live this way, maybe we could live that way. And there's small communities all over the world that are experimenting with different ways of living, and not having currency, and living in communities and everybody helping each other. And coming from like my parents were farmers. I was born on a farm, and it was funny because growing up, my dad would always tell me about how happy he was living in Portugal. And I'm like, Dad, you didn't have TV, you didn't have entertainment, I'm like, why are you happy? What are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, but I didn't have stress. and I'm like, you're right. And they had enough food and alcohol that they needed because they grew it on the farm and they made wine, and they were happy. And then you realize, like, holy shit, like, yeah, after like food and shelter, all this other stuff's just extra. Like, you don't need it, you don't need it for happiness. And when you look at statistics on like the happiest people on earth, and I mean, look at the US, we have more material stuff than ever, and we're some of the most unhappy people in the world. So I think this idea of community, and that's the other thing too, is like, even though the internet has connected me and you, from Western Massachusetts to Japan, but sometimes we're disconnected from my neighbor who lives right next door, or so it's like we're connecting with people on the internet, but we're disconnected from everybody else around us. And like, I live in this town, Ludlow, where there's a lot of Portuguese people. It's where I grew up. And the one thing I like about a lot of these guys who I live near, who are foreigners like I am, and my parents and stuff, that we help each other out. My neighbor asks me if I need tomatoes. If I have something, I'll give it to him. And there's a sense of community where there's a lot of people who don't even know their neighbors and don't even want to know their neighbors. And don't get me wrong, there's probably some really shitty neighbors out there you don't want to know. But I think there's still something about this sense of community where it makes it easier for us to care less about what's happening in the world. It makes it easier for us to care less about, wars or deaths and stuff, because we're so focused on just making more money and getting promoted and all that stuff. And do you think that, that's a huge issue with this whole idea of, even though we feel like we're more connected because of the internet, and it is awesome that we do have this ability, it's almost a false sense of being connected because we're disconnected from people who are actually closer to us?
Absolutely. There's no doubt that that our sense of what community is changing. Our definition of it is changing as people start to identify friends as those Facebook entities more than people you actually interact with in human reality, which is dangerous in a lot of different ways. And I think we all understand how we are being more and more nested and invested in this matrix-like reality where we're all down with our head in a screen for 10 hours a day, according to the latest stats from what I've heard, as opposed to actually interacting with other human beings around us. So yes, there is absolutely that danger. I'm not here to be a Luddite and to say that there's that we should discard that entirely. I mean, yes, so technology changes the relations of society. That's the way it's always been. And the idea a few hundred years ago that you could live in one area, one city, and work in another would have been ridiculous, laughable, unthinkable. Now it's pretty average. So, I mean, technology can change the way we think about communities and the way we relate to others. But yes, there is the danger that we're going to lose real, actual human community and interaction. And I think that has to be stressed, that this is not just an online phenomenon. The ripple effect does not just take place online, because if it does, then yes, it is just an echo chamber of sorts. And yes, you can create communities of interest, but what does that really mean in the real world? So I think there has to be a balance, and there has to be more emphasis on the human relations rather than relations through the medium of technology. Another aspect to what you're saying there is that I think we should point out is that you're talking, for example, in the context of the economic ramifications of all this, something like the zeitgeist movement. And I think it's important to understand that there is also, I mean, just as there is the kind of surface level and then the propaganda and then kind of the underlying meaning that's talked about in geopolitics and things, I think that takes place in every facet of society, so that even in the alternative types of media and structures, there's always, I think, different strains that are presented that may be just different facets of the control grid. So, for example, when we say the word sustainability, people in the alternative media will now be programmed to think Agenda 21, evil, UN, takeover, which, I understand, because this is the rhetoric that those people hide behind. But the actual idea of something being sustainable is not in and of itself evil. You know what I mean? I mean, that concept has been appropriated by people who are going to use that for control purposes, whereas the concept itself now seems to be tainted in a way that it shouldn't be. We should be able to talk about practices that are sustainable, but if we use that word, people are going to tell us about Agenda 21 and things like that. Well, then let's find a different way to put that so that people will understand it. So it's about independence. It's about not being connected to some sort of control grid. Let's frame it in that way, and people will understand what we're talking about. And we can create a independent economy. We can create a sustainable economy. We can create an economy that isn't based on this debt-based, phony, fiat, funny money garbage that we've been conditioned into believing is somehow reflective of reality. In the same way, a zeitgeist will come along with, I think, some economic muddle-headed thinking and some historically ignorant thinking to try to put on a technocratic control grid under the guise of, hey, everybody, it's going to be a utopia with robots trying to determine, how to allocate resources of society, completely ignoring the economic allocation problem, and also just completely ignoring the history of technocracy and how it's been attempted over and over and has been a horrendous disaster every time it's ever taken place. But it is presented in an alternative way. Hey, this is alternative too, guys. It's all part of this stuff that's going on. So I think we have to be wary of those kinds of false ideas that are implanted as alternatives that I think are implanted from the top by people who understand how to shape. I understand that there is a growing alternative movement going on, and so you need to put out some of those false pathways in the alternative as well for people to stumble down. And that's an interesting factor in all of this as well, because it does create the real question, the real problem of how we sort through this. Because talk about information overload. It's not just that now we have to be aware of everything that's going on in the mainstream. It's also, we also have to sort through the alternative, because just because something is alternative doesn't make it right. And why should anyone listen to me, let alone listen to anyone else, right? We all have to sort through this in our own way, which means there's going to be 7 billion people, 7 billion different paths through this information to try to arrive at something resembling the truth. And that's an extremely difficult process. And I try to think of it as a process rather than an end goal. I mean, we are never going to arrive at that point where we 100% know everything, we know the truth. And anyone who tells you otherwise is a disgusting liar and shouldn't be believed. So it is the question of how we construct the processes through which we can get our way towards that truth. And so that's what I try to do in my work, is to try to be an example of that, of at least my process for getting there, which is to try to document everything, try to talk about everything as deep a way as I can, with as much evidence as I can, without going too much on the speculative limb. And that's something that I hope will be reflected more in the alternative media, because it's truly one of the big failings at this point that I see. And as an example, I will point to this recent documentary that people are sending me very excitedly. Everything is a Rich Man's Trick, from JFK to 9/11. I've had a lot of people tell me this is the best documentary in years. It's so great. It's so wonderful. I think it is a terrible documentary, and I think so precisely because if there is a hyperlinked transcript of this documentary somewhere online, I'd love to see it, and maybe I'll take back everything I'm saying if there is. But all I've seen of it is this documentary, which makes a lot of bare assertions with zero evidence whatsoever presented for me as a viewer to go and say, oh, okay, that's where he's getting that, or oh, that's how he's interpreting that piece of information. And it's so disheartening for me to see so many of my audience, who I think would be people who are interested in seeing documentation and evidence and how this is constructed, just going for this. And it's interesting because in that documentary, there are things that are said that I agree with. But even the things that I agree with, I'm uncomfortable with because of the way that they're presented to the audience. And if we become an alternative media that's just relying on bare assertions, hey, I said this, therefore it's true, then we've lost. Because even if we arrive at the right conclusion somehow through that process, then we are still basically children who are just going to listen to whatever someone comes along and says, and the next liar who comes along and says a big lie to us will believe because we're in that mindset. So it is more about the process. It is more about the ideas, how we come to the truth, rather than someone coming to you with the truth, with facts, with knowledge, which is why I don't put myself on a pedestal and I don't put anyone else on a pedestal. We are all people who are just trying to find our path through this information. And it's more about how we get there than about the facts and information itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And it's funny. Well, first, anybody who says they have truth with a capital T is obviously trying to start a cult or trying to get laid, one of the two, or both, or both. Usually both. Guys who start cults seem like they're trying to get laid, and it just that's probably one of the motivations. But yeah, it's funny you bring up that documentary, because I just had Eddie Bravo on, and I actually did run into that documentary, and I had Eddie Bravo on, and he brought it up, and we talked about it, and he talked about this idea that communism is just they don't want communism because did you watch the documentary or get through some of
Everything is a Rich Man's Trick?
Yeah.
Yes, I
yeah,
did.
and Eddie Bravo was talking about how it's like this conspiracy with communism, how the rich people don't want communism to get popular or big because of the fact that it takes the power away from the rich man, and that's what he got from it. It is weird because it is one of those documentaries that it's like there are things in it that you're like, okay, I'm on board, and then there's parts of it that you're like, well, are you connecting dots? And it was a lot of straight talking, like, okay, this is what happened, this is why that happened, with very little evidence or I guess even dots to even connect, to be like, okay, well, that makes sense because he has this to reference or whatever. And I think that's one thing that we have to be a little worried about with documentaries or anything, really. I know I've gotten into arguments with friends of mine who say, oh, well, you can't believe all documentaries and or documentaries are just, they have agendas just like mainstream media, this and that. And I'm just like, well, yeah, you're right. But I'm like, if a fracking documentary gives me some information about fracking that has some good information in it, his agenda might be to bash this fracking company. But if I get some good information in the process, then maybe it's not a bad thing, So you definitely have to filter out the bullshit with the good information, and you really should take everything with a grain of salt. And like you said, even in a documentary like that, you might be able to take something away from it, but you do have to be careful because sometimes you can get very caught up into something, because as a filmmaker yourself, you can be really creative with the way you make a film, make it emotional, make it show certain parts and not show other clips, and next thing you know, I can be sold on something after that film, and then after I research it and be like, holy shit, that's not true, or so that is a dangerous thing. So.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many different aspects to that, but one of them is that there are certain things that get repeated so often in the mainstream or in the alternative media, just certain things that become true simply because people always say them over and over and over, and no one ever questions them. So, for example, in that documentary, and I'm not focusing on this documentary, I just saw it recently, so I'm just thinking about it, but there's this JFK Secret Society speech is presented in the way that speech is usually presented. So this was a speech that JFK made, I believe, in 61 to the National Press Club or some sort of press club, where he was speaking, and the parts that are always used in the alt media are parts of that speech which make it sound like we as a nation are inherently opposed to secret societies and secret proceedings, blah blah blah, which makes it sound like, oh, he's exposing the New World Order as Skull and Bones or something like that, and he's speaking out against the secret societies. And as I pointed out in a Questions for Corbett podcast a little while ago, if you actually look at the real speech, the actual speech, it is the exact opposite of the way it's portrayed in the alt media. And as even I fell for years ago, before I went and looked at it myself and really put it into context, it's so easy to take little bits and pieces, which is what is done. You take a piece here and you take a piece there and you put them together and make it sound like it's one speech. And you think, oh, he's speaking against secret societies. When you put it in that context of the real speech, though, you figure out it's actually the exact opposite. He's actually saying, hey, we have a wonderful, free, open society here in America, so you guys better not publish what we don't want you to publish, because loose lips sink ships. That's the message of the speech, is we're not going to control you, but don't publish our secrets, kind of thing. It's a really, complete 180 degrees from the way it's portrayed in the alt media. And that's one of those things, again, it was shown in that documentary as a, hey, look, JFK was the best thing since sliced bread and wonderful in every way, and this is why they killed him. And it's not nearly that simple. And a lot of people who are in the alt media will simply nod their head and go, yep, I've seen that before, I agree, without, again, looking at what underlies it. And so, again, we can come to false conclusions simply because we don't have the process in place for verifying that information.
Well, it's true, because even the Eisenhower industrial, military complex speech, he was a part of building it. And I remember growing up and like hearing that speech, and I'm like, holy shit, Eisenhower's awesome. He exposed the industrial war complex and all, and then all of a sudden I'd like do some research and watch some historical documentaries and do some reading. And I'm like, wait, these other people are saying he was a part of building it. And it's just like, if I just watch that clip or listen to that speech over and over again as it gets, put on different places, and don't get me wrong, it's still a important clip, it's important speech, but we can't you can't just take, like you said, you can't just hear one speech, one clip, and then just think you understand it or think that's it. That's, what you see is what you get, and there's nothing more to it. And so I think it is important to, to do your research, even if it is something that gets, and then it gets passed around, and then everybody just kind of is on board. And that's where it gets scary, because even the alternative media, the way that I talk about Republicans and Democrats and how silly that debate is and how people just pick teams and you're a Ford guy, I'm a Chevy guy, and all this stuff. Well, we're also doing it sometimes in the alternative media. We're just like, oh, it's us against them, and so every viewpoint that the alternative media has, we have to agree with, and so like you said, it's same thing with what, I forget what example you used now, but it's the same thing with the JFK speech. We all agree that that's him exposing Skull and Crossbones and Bilderberg and all the secret societies, and then everybody just jumps on board because we're a team and we can't disagree, and I think that's such a tribal and dangerous way of thinking, and I think we do. The same way we question government and politicians and conflicts that we get involved in and don't get involved in, we should question even the media that we're listening to. And one thing I've always given you a lot of props for is the fact that you always have links to articles and reference everything, which is a whole lot of fucking work. But I think it's one.
It makes me wonder why I did the complete transcript, the hyperlinked transcript for my Federal Reserve documentary, so you can see exactly where I got every piece of information and how I connected those dots, how I interpreted that information, so you can come to your own conclusion. Why did I put all that work into it if the same people who listen and apparently appreciate my work will listen to another documentary that doesn't do any of that and just makes a lot of bare assertions, and they'll equally go along with that? it's really disappointing.
But that's the unpredictable thing about the internet. I mean, it's just like you talking about your 9/11 video that kind of just blew up, and it's so unpredictable. You could spend so much work on something and think it's like, this is the greatest piece of work I've done, and then you put it out and it's like, oh, okay, people like it, and then you could do something little, and next thing you know, it blows up, it gets tweeted, it gets shared, and even like that.
Yeah, that's very true. But I don't want to make it look like it's a complaint on my side. I'm happy to do that work because it's, at the very least, it's informative for me to be able to put those pieces together and have all the evidence there and see how I'm doing that and making it external. But I don't think this is something that we can expect to change overnight or even ever. Maybe it's part of human nature that we do have some sort of groupthink built in that is the default for a lot of people, myself included. I'm not excluding myself. We all fall into these traps, and we all have to be vigilant against them. But again, it's the question of the process, and we have to have a process in place.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I won't take any more of your time because I know you're a busy man. You got more things to do and more videos and stuff. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Sorry about not telling you I was recording. I figured I always start recording right when we start talking, because there's been too many times where we're limited on time and I get caught up in a conversation and I don't record it. And I'm like, well, that could have been added to the show and whatever. So sorry to sneak up on you and record the beginning of the conversation. But thanks again, James. I really appreciate it. I look forward to, and everybody subscribe to his channel, his podcast, donate to his show. This guy puts a lot of work in, and I think like most shows, we probably get a lot more people who listen than actually donate. And so even if it's just a little bit, help the guy out. He's doing this for a living. He has a son to feed, and he has a family, and it's important that you keep doing this, because I think we'd all feel really guilty if one day you couldn't afford to continue doing this, and we would all really be hurt, because I look forward to your videos. I'm a subscriber and donator to your channel, and I'm very happy to do so. For the money that you ask, it's very little compared to the content. So it's we get a lot of material for very little money. So it's worth every penny. So guys, support James Corbett. As you know, I'm a huge fan. He was one of my first guests, and I continue to support him and look forward to future work.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for having me on, Ricky. Always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, James. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Believe in the ripple effect.